What's in this thing?
Today, we have the Intel i7-980 and I'm going to overclock it. Launched in 2011, the i7-980 retailed for around £400 to £500, making it one of the most expensive consumer CPUs around at that time. Using the LGA 1366 socket, the i7-980 has 6 cores and 12 threads, with a base clock of 3.33 GHz and a max boost clock of 3.6 GHz. The test bench for this overclock is i7-980, Arctic Cooling Freezer Extreme, Gigabyte GA-EX58 Extreme, 24GB of Crucial Basilisk Tactical 1600 MHz, a GTX 590, Kingston 120GB SSD, and a Cooler Master Masterwatt Lite 700W. Let's get a baseline for this CPU at stock speeds. I'll be using Cinebench R11.5 to test the performance change, as it's from around the same time period as this CPU. For the baseline, I reset the motherboard to its failsafe defaults. However, I set the RAM to XMP profile 1 to allow it to run at its rated speed of 1600 MHz. After running Cinebench, we get a result of 8.54 with a max CPU clock of 3.46 GHz. Now we've established the performance at stock speeds, we can start to overclock it. Let's start with disabling a few settings and increasing the base clock to 166 MHz. Now we can run Cinebench and see what score we get. The run finished with a result of 9.29, an 8.78% improvement over stock with a max CPU clock of 3.65 GHz. Now let's try to push the base clock higher. I've managed to get it 203 MHz, giving us a clock speed of 4.26 GHz. Cinebench gives us a score of 10.2, a 19.44% improvement from the original score, plus we're still running at 1.376 with manageable temperatures. For the next test, I decided to reduce the base clock and use a multiplier to push the CPU clock higher. I settled on 193 MHz base clock, giving us 4.43 GHz. However, I had to increase the core voltage to 1.475 in BIOS to achieve this. Cinebench gives a score of 11.19, 31% increase from stock result. Hardware Info 64 reported a max voltage of 1.456 on the CPU. I performed many tests after this to increase clock speeds, but I was unsuccessful without crashes or too high temperatures. So I decided to get creative. A couple of 80mm fans and a 120 on the other side to increase airflow. With the improved airflow, I could push the voltage higher to achieve 4.51 GHz with 205 MHz base clock with 1.525 volts in BIOS. This gave a Cinebench score of 11.42 with Hardware Info 64 reporting the highest temperature of 93 Celsius and 1.504 volts on the CPU core. I couldn't push it any higher without running into temperature limits, so I had to stop there. Maybe I'll water cool this and try again. 5 GHz would be nice. As a final note, I've had the CPU at 4.7 GHz, however when I tried to run Cinebench, I was unable to get a complete run without a crash. I think more voltage would fix this, but that's for a future video. Thanks for watching, hopefully this is useful to someone.